In the last video, we did a deep dive into what a rig is, and in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into the animation system, how you animate rigs in the AirPig game engine. I apologize in advance for my scratchy voice, but we're gonna do this anyway. And one other note that I always lead off with my videos, this is very much an alpha version of the engine. By the time you actually can use this, there's a good chance the UI will look different and there will be some different features, but hopefully this helps you understand what is possible. We'll start by looking at an animation that is actively playing, even in this map editor view. This light post is the light is wiggling back and forth and it's playing some particle effects. So let's go ahead and look at that rig. So this rig has 3 bones, and this is the rig view that we explored in the last video. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on here, but there are 3 bones here. Each one has a sprite. So you can see there's a lamp sprite, a lamp arm, that's this little metal piece, and then the post itself. So if we switch over to rigs, I'll do a quick kind of tour of the UI first. Some rigs have different variants. So you might have a humanoid rig that has a goblin variant or a skeleton variant. If there's variants, you can click this drop down and actually preview different variants while you're animating. This particular rig only has one variant, so that won't apply here. The next box is a list of the animations. You can click on an animation and rename it using this box here. There are tooltips if you hover over any of these components. So if you forget, you can just hover for a moment and it'll tell what the component does or what the UI control does. The next checkbox is the looping checkbox. Animations like the resting animation are looping, so they just play over and over. Many attack animations and other animations are not looping, they just play once through and then usually it changes to some other animation. So you can check or uncheck this box to control whether something is looping or not. Then there's buttons to add, duplicate, remove, or move an animation up and down in this list. The next section shows your bones. So this is how you select a bone for editing on the animation timeline. This down here is the animation. I call it a scrubber. So this is the playhead of the animation. And you can see as I move this back and forth, this light changes slightly. The green dots are keyframes. So there's a keyframe defined here, and there's a keyframe defined here at position 50. Every animation in AirPig has 100 segments. And so animations are time independent. You can slice an animation of any length into 100 possible pieces. And this just makes it easy to have a standardized animation system, and then you can scale it for things like attacks to make it attack faster or slower. So animations will always have a position. The keyframes will, and then there's the play and pause buttons here. You can play the animation and just preview what it looks like or pause it. The duration scales the animation. So if you want to see what it looks like when it's playing slower, this immediately is playing the animation much slower. Obviously you can play it very, very slow. So this would take 20 seconds for that animation to make it through a single playthrough, or you can play it actually really fast, and we can play it 0.2 seconds, and you see a fairly chaotic and fast animation. So this is how the animation system works. There's always 100 discrete units in an animation, and then that can be scaled to any time frame. The keyframes that you see here are listed in order here. Every keyframe is given a random identifier. You can't actually change that because that is how the engine keeps track of things in a way that can't be broken. And so you can't change these keyframe IDs, and then the number next to it is the position that that keyframe is in. There is really no reason to change keyframe IDs. When you click on them, it jumps to where it is, and trying to name every keyframe in an animation would be difficult to keep track of. So we just automatically assign names that are guaranteed to be unique and don't change so that animations don't break. You can add a keyframe to the current bone with this button. This will add a keyframe at the current position for every bone. So this is handy if you know that you're going to be moving a lot of bones at the same keyframe or at the same time point. You can keyframe all the bones at once. You can destroy a keyframe with the delete button, and then you can select the next and previous keyframes. You can turn the bone display on or off. This can be helpful or in the way depending on the situation. So we give you the ability to turn it on or off. And then you can actually set the exact pixel position for a bone or the rotation. Then the next thing is the alpha, so how transparent the sprite is, whether or not it's visible. So visible is a binary state, either something is visible or not, whereas alpha is a state that interpolates, and this is a decimal point from 0 to 1. Damage active, we'll talk about that on a different rig that actually can do attacks. This determines what keyframes can deal damage. And then setting a sound and setting a particle are things that you can do per keyframe, and you can change the volume for a sound. And again, this is a 0 to 1 value, the volume is. So this particular animation plays particle effects and it moves back and forth. So actually, let's turn the bones on because the only thing happening in here, if I look at these other bones, they only have one keyframe. So they're not doing any kind of animation. The lamp just has two keyframes. So at this keyframe, the rotation of the bone is -93. So -90 would be straight down. 0 is to the right. So -90 is rotating this way. Positive rotation goes counterclockwise. So -90 is straight down. So this animation is starting at -93, a slight leftward tilt. And then the next keyframe is -87. So it's basically rotating 3 degrees back and forth. And since it's a looping animation, this keyframe will interpolate past the end of the animation back to the first keyframe. So you can see it moving back there. So that's how an animation works. They're fairly simple. Really, the whole process is you set keyframes, you position the bones of the animation, each keyframe, and then it interpolates through those, and all animations are created that way. You can also set particles and play a particle effect. And this dialogue is going to look a little bit intimidating, but it's fairly easy if you just walk through it one field at a time. So setting the particle, this gives you a hint at what it is, particle circle yellow. So we'll actually just look particle circle. And so this is the yellow particle. So that's the particle that this is going to play. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't actually want to change that. And this will, this is a from 1 to 1 particle. So it will emit exactly one particle. But I could give this a range and make it 0 to 10, and it would randomize how many it emitted. The offset is the offset along the bone, the X and Y offset. I won't explain these deeply because you can just experiment with these, but this determines if you want to play a particle at the root of the bone, which would be 0, 0, or somewhere along the bone. And so you can choose exactly where the particles play. The emission angle is where the angle the particle emits relative to the bone. 0 is along the bone's point. So if we look at this, it's pointing down, so 0 would emit straight down. Then the emission spread is like a wedge. So what is the spread of the particles? If I put like 90 in here, that would mean they emit randomly at a 90 degree, in a 90 degree wedge from this angle. Min speed and max speed are fairly self-explanatory. You can choose how fast the particles explode out from their emission point. And you can also apply drag to them. So if you wanted an explosion effect, you might have high speeds, but also high drag. So you get particles that blow out quickly and then kind of stay in a ring if you want sort of a cartoony explosion effect. You can set the min and max scaling and how much it scales per second. Positive number gets bigger over time, and a negative number gets smaller. Same thing for alpha. You can set the min and max alpha. This is a 0 to 1 value, so this would be 5% to 8% alpha is what we're emitting at. And we're going to turn the alpha down by 1% per second. And since these have such low alpha, then they'll disappear within several seconds. So some light math there to figure out. Rotation style, there's 3 different rotation styles you can have. None means you can specify a min and a max rate, and the particles will rotate at a random speed in between that, and that's degrees per second. You can also randomize the min and max starting rotation, so that way your particles aren't all starting at exactly the same rotation. You can randomize that. If you choose one of the other rotation styles, it disables most of these fields. So there's rotate to velocity, and that will use the velocity and rotate your particle towards the velocity. So that's good for things that have a directionality to them. Like if you had a little streak or spark particle, you might want that particle to always rotate in the direction it's moving to look like it is flying through the air. Then the velocity to rotation is the inverse of that. So you could randomize the rotation and it would use the speed and it would set its movement direction based on the current rotation. So you could have this set randomly and it would like wiggle through the air randomly based on how fast it's rotating at whatever speed it gets. So a lot of these you can just kind of play with them and see what happens. This is an important one though. This is the removal event. And you do want to make sure that the removal event is hit or the particle will never be removed. So if you set the removal event to be alpha 0, but you don't ever, alpha doesn't ever reach 0 because you're not making the number smaller, then your particles will stick around forever. So you could set removal to be based on seconds, based on alpha, or based on size. So you could have particles blow out large and get smaller, and use a size of like 0 or a very small number to remove the particle. The cool thing about this is while this may look a little confusing and it may take a little experimentation to understand how these values affect it, you can preview this in real time. Actually, let's turn that speed back down and see exactly what's happening. So every time we hit a keyframe, we're emitting one particle, and um, so that's the one particle. It's offset a little bit down the bone. That's because we don't want the light particle to come out here. We want it to come down the bone a little bit. And so we're setting an offset there. Note that the offset is in bone coordinates. So even though we're going down, this is actually a positive X value because the default rotation for the bone is pointing right. And so we're moving that in a positive X direction towards the right. It's just that the bone is rotated down. So that can be a little confusing to get used to, but it is a relative to the bone offset system. Then we're scaling this particle up quite a bit and we're giving it a low alpha and then it slowly fades. So that just gives these lamps kind of a twinkle effect that's fairly subtle. And going back to the map, you can kind of see this it just looks like a little flickering glow. So that is a fairly simple rig. The particles are a little bit complicated, but the rig itself is fairly simple. Let's look at a more complicated rig. So we're going to open up our humanoid rig, and this is what all of the NPCs in this game example are based on. And so you can see right away that there's quite a few more bones, and actually if I turn these on, you can see we have quite a few bones. So there's one for the head, one for each hand, one for each leg, one for the body, and one for the shadow. And you can also see we have a lot more rigs. One other thing to note is when you set this rig behavior, so a rig can be a character, container, or prop, it's going to automatically ensure that you have several rigs or several animations in here. Even if you don't use them or choose not to do those animations, they will exist because that behavior type may require that animation. So here we'll look at this resting animation. The shadow and stuff doesn't move, but we're going to have some slight movement in the body here. So you can see this is just kind of a breathing animation, and we'll go ahead and play this. Um, and really, this is exactly the same as the light post. We just have more bones here doing more things. So we've got the body, the head. These have offset frames a little bit, which make it look a little bit more organic. The body and the head move at a little bit different rate. The hand, in this case, I name this hand F. F is for front, so that's the hand that's towards the front of the body. And then there's a hand R for rear. That's the hand that's towards the back of the body. Each of these things is animating at a slightly different rate. So this is still a fairly simple animation. Um, one thing that is required is that these have an unarmed animation. And I say that now, and actually this one doesn't, but it should. But we'll look at some of the more complicated animations here, like this attack animation. Notice that this is not a looping animation. So moving loops and resting loops, but the attacks do not. So in this case, we'll actually look at the front hand because this is the weapon hand. And so you can see there's some red keyframes here. Those are damage keyframes. So we have our prep for attack, and then damage turns on here. And then we have a fast attack. So that's like slamming into the ground. And then we pause for a little bit. And then we have the recovery. And so the way that I typically approach this, and I'm not a very good animator, but I'll start with the thing that is the most important in an action. So in the attack, it's really the weapon hand. So I'll kind of animate that first and get that right. And then I'll move and do the body, and how does the body have to move in order to support that weapon motion. And then I'll do the head, and then I usually do the legs last and position them based on where they would need to be to support that action. So this leg is moving back and kind of widening its stance to get ready for an explosive attack. Then the weight shifts and the legs shift a little bit as the weight shifts. And then there's a pause, and then the legs recover slowly as the character stands back up after the attack. Like we demonstrated on the lamppost, you can also set sounds and particles. I don't think I'm playing any. Oh, I am playing a particle right here. So I'm playing a particle, a gray particle. I'm also playing a sound here. So if we play this, we should be able to preview both of those things. So you can see, and the particle effect is just a little bit of a smash effect. And this attack chop, then this is not a required animation. So I have multiple different kinds of attacks here. And basically you can create any number of animations. And then when you're configuring items, so I'll just quickly demonstrate, like I think this battle axe is set to use the attack chop animation. So we can preview this here. Oops, let's preview. So you can kind of see that we're playing that particle effect at about where we expect the weapon attack point to be. So you can basically define any amount of animations. There's some required ones like resting and moving, interacting, dying. Those are required animations that the engine will add for you so that it has a way to play like the death animation. But then you can add as many animations as you want for different types of attacks. And then you can choose for an item to attach to the hand and use that animation. So we'll go over items in a future video, but that just shows you quickly kind of how these things relate together. We'll load one more rig. I think this is called, I forgot what I called it, hover mob. So this is a fairly simple rig in that there's only a couple of bones in it, but I wanted to just show a little bit of some different ways that I did stuff here. So this is fairly simple. And if we look at the resting animation, all that's happening here with the main head is it's just bobbing up and down. We're actually doing a lot of particle effects here. And one of the things when I was making this animation, I realized I wanted a lot of particles to emit. And I wanted to give it kind of a fire effect. So we can see that if we play it. You can see uh, a lot of this kind of fire effect going on. One thing I found is that I frequently wanted to do the same particle for multiple frames, and I didn't want to have to fill out this whole little form of configuring the particle. So one of the things that you can do is notice in this frame I play a particle, but in this one I don't. And it's like I'm playing particles every other keyframe, but if I want to play particles every keyframe, I can click this button and that will copy the particle. Then I can move the target keyframe and do this to paste it. So now, and I can do that again here. And now all of these keyframes will play particles and we get a lot more flame effect. And then if it's like actually on these in between, I want to emit smoke, I can just go change this and we'll do like a black circle, get kind of a smoke effect. And we'll do that on this one too. And now we'll get, we should get some smoke as well. That's not really showing up, so I can tweak that a little bit. Let's give that a little bit more speed. Maybe try like 8 to 15 and make that fade just a little bit slower and see what that looks like. I'm seeing the smoke back there, but it's still too subtle. So this is kind of how you tune stuff. Let's turn this up a little bit more. Let's go 15 to 30 and see. We'll give this 0 drag as well. And I'm going to give it a little bit more of a scale range. Okay, now we're actually getting a smoke particle. Now it's lasting a little too long, so I'm going to turn that alpha back down. We'll turn the alpha up, sorry. Let's go like 0.4. That's too much. Go back down. Okay, cool. I like that. And so now that I've got that kind of configured, I'm going to copy that particle and paste it. So we're kind of alternating between fire and smoke here, and we should end up with kind of there we go, a little bit of a smoky effect. And keep in mind when you're doing your particles that this is the actual, about 200% is probably what it's going to be like in game. So you want to make sure those particles aren't going too far, and also subtle is better. So let's actually see that guy in action. Let me just show you a couple of his other animations real quick. So we've got our resting animation. I don't think I even did a dashing animation yet. We've got a damaging animation, so kind of gets hit and blows out some particles. We've got a dying animation. Oh, and I did want to show, so that fades to like a crispy skull. So I have this, the floater is the colorful orange skull, and then dead floater is a black skull that's like the crispy charred skull. And I just fade, so you can see in the floater here, we go from alpha 1 to alpha 0. And on the dead floater right here, we go from not visible to visible. So we turn that on right behind the other one as we fade it out so that that fades to black. And it also will emit a few particles. Oh, the other interesting thing in this one is I created an effects bone, which is where most of the particles play from. And I kind of move that around and emit some black particles here. So it kind of like smokes for a little bit as it's fading out. So we will load a map where I have one of those guys. I'm going to actually clear my, so I've got one of those little guys sitting right there. I'm going to destroy my save game because if I've killed this guy and that's saved, then the next time I play test, that won't show up. So there's an easy way to destroy your game save, so you're resetting to a vanilla state, basically. And so I have this little guy here. You can see I can preview him, and he's just playing his little resting animation. He is currently set to, there's this area defined as a patrol area, and he is set to patrol that area. So when we enter this little dungeon, you'll see he's just patrolling around. And when I walk into his little area, he'll come and attack me. So he's trying to smack me with his head. And then I'll like kill him. It's kind of whooping me right now. Oops. Okay, so then you saw his death animation. So that's kind of how everything comes together. So you've seen rigs and then how to add animations to rigs. And really that's just a learning process of learning how to set keyframes and animate bones over time. And then you can see how that flows into the game. And the game is automatically picking those predefined animations to play. But then you do have control over what animations play when you use different weapons. That's all can be set on individual weapons. So like each of these is using different attacks here that I have defined on this rig. So we really have a lot of customization. I wanted to show also how different this little floating head enemy was from a humanoid enemy from a light post. All of those things are using rigs, and all of those things are using animations to play particle effects and sounds at particular points in time. So system really gives you a lot of flexibility. And that is all I have to show for the animation system. We'll talk in a future video about variants and items and quests, and then eventually how to put all of that together into really rich maps that have quests and spawn areas and patrol areas and transition zones and all of the things to make a really rich and deeply featured game.